Okay, um, so just real quick on my story, as she said, my mother developed the disease in the 90s. And, back then there just wasn't really any way of diagnosing it. So they just kept telling us that she had a stroke and it affected her short-term memory. And so um, I lived in Texas, moved my family home, and then a year later moved in the house with my mom. And so then I was there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And my sister Linda, I have a twin sister, and she came over and helped me. So at least I had, we had each other, and we could talk to each other and be like, what does this mean? Why is my mom doing this? And and so it was such a blessing having each other. But so my mom died in '04. And so that really, kicked off our journey. And then, as Molly said, we printed the playbook. And then when we were traveling around the country is when I noticed my dad was coming down with it. And, I would look at Molly and I would say, did he just say that? Did he just do that? And I was like, oh my gosh, because, I knew it here, but I could not accept it here. I mean, it was devastating. And so, but what's interesting is our journey with him was so different because we were educated. We knew what was coming. We knew how to redirect and all those things. So education is so important. So I really thank you all for being here, because when you learn about this disease and you understand the disease and how to care for it, it makes the journey so much easier, and it gives everybody a better quality of life. So this is my family here, and my twin sister is up there kind of in the middle. But after my mom passed away, my dad made this, and it's kind of the early years of their life, and then the middle, and then the one on the end there with all the grandkids was the last Christmas that my mom was with the children. So anyway, that's my family. So when I talk about BB, I'm going to use she in all of my examples because, that's just kind of the way I've always done it. And so, but anyway, that's my family. So I love this quote. If you want tomorrow to be better than today, then you need to learn something in order to change it. So I hope each and every one of you learn something and be able to take it home and use it with you. So it's very important, I think, to understand what dementia means, because a lot of people don't really understand what it means. And so dementia is really just a medical word that is used when there are changes occurring in the brain. The first one always is short-term memory loss. And then the second one is it changes how people talk. It changes how people act. And then they begin to start having problems doing things. And I'm going to go more into this in a few minutes. So there's two things that I think are very interesting about this disease. And what's really important to understand is they live moment to moment to moment. And so from a caregiver standpoint, you want to try to figure out where they are in this. Okay, actually, that's wrong. So if you think about rolling, I'm on the next slide. If you think about rolling hills, when they're on top of the hill, they understand everything that's going on around them, who they're with, what they're doing, and they're okay with it. You can see it in their eyes. But when they slide down in the valley, you'll see their facial expressions change, sometimes their body language. And in that moment, they're just unsure of, where they are, who they're with. But what I've learned, it's usually, what am I supposed to be doing? So that's how they live. Early in the disease, it's more like a plateau. They're good. And then you'll notice something that you go, oh, that was kind of odd, But as the disease progresses, they live in this moment. And then they live in this moment. And then they live in this moment. And so what you do back here in that moment, it's very important to how this moment and the next moment goes as well. So one of the things that we've noticed about the disease is, if you think of an airplane, it kind of clips along like this. And then with my mom, we would notice she would clip along, and then she would take a dip. And in that dip, we would notice changes. And my sister would be like, gosh, look what she's doing now. What do you think this means? But she would always come up. She just would not come up as high as she was. And then she would clip along again. And so that's the progression of the disease. And so there's 3 stages. You have your early, middle, and late. And in the middle stage, if you enter in the middle stage or they call it moderate now, 0 entering the middle stage and 10 exiting it. When you hit number 5, we call it middle, then the second half of the disease, you see more changes. They happen more rapidly during that time. And so I have a lot of people come up and ask me, they'll say, I'm not sure if my mom has, Alzheimer's, what's something that I can do? So here's kind of a layman's way that you can check a loved one and see, what their mind is doing with them right now. So I'm going to say my mother. If I wanted to check on my mother, I might say, hey, Mom, meet me at McDonald's at 1 o'clock. Well, if she meets you at McDonald's at 1 o'clock, then you don't have a problem at all. But if 1 o'clock comes around and she doesn't meet you, but she calls you at 3 o'clock and says, oh my gosh, Betsy, I forgot to meet you at McDonald's. That can be MCI and some normal age, the brain. But if tomorrow comes and she's not there at 1 o'clock and you call her at 5 o'clock and you say to her, hey, Mom, weren't we going to meet today at McDonald's at 1 o'clock? And she says, well, you didn't tell me that we were going to meet today, and you can hear some defensiveness in her voice, then she totally forgot it. And so that might be a time that you want to take your loved one and have them checked. Yes, ma'am. MCI is mild cognitive impairment. It's kind of normal aging of the brain, and I'm not sure what the statistic is today, but a lot of people that are, it used to be 50% of people that were diagnosed with MCI would go into some form of dementia. So, okay. So this took me years to understand this, but as the disease progresses, their age regresses. So from a caregiver standpoint, you want to try to figure out where they are in this age regression. So you ask yourself, well, how do I do that? Well, if you listen very carefully to things that they say, it will give you some insight into where they are. For example, if a husband is looking for his wife and his wife walks in the room, and in that moment, okay, he's in the valley and he doesn't recognize her, then perhaps he's between maybe age 20 to age 50 because he knows he's married, but he doesn't recognize her because she's gray-headed. And so if a mother is looking for her children and her children walk in the room, and in that moment she doesn't recognize them, then maybe she's in her early 20s to early 30s because she's thinking of her children when they're young. And then when they start asking for their mother or they want to go home, then they're in their adolescence. If you think about our children, when they're afraid, what do they want? They want to go home and they want their mother, So it's interesting. So if you listen to things that they tell you, their stories, then step back and ask yourself, how old were they during that time? And that can give you an idea of where they are in that moment, But then as the disease progresses too, then they do move back in time. Like, for example, so my dad used to be the football coach, and he was very blessed and won a national championship. And so I was taking him out to Catfish Hole to eat lunch with a bunch of his players. And so I'd always prep him. I'd say like, okay, Dad, we're going to Catfish Hole and we're going to have some good catfish. And I said, you know what? We're meeting some of your players. And I said, a lot of them are from the national championship team. And he looked at me and he said, did we win a national championship? And so because it was my second rodeo, what I realized is that talking to him but anything from 1964 forward, he has no memory of. He's totally back past that time in his memory. And so anyway, I think that's interesting, but also the stories that they tell you, and they do a lot of repeating, is when later in the disease, when a lot of times they can't communicate as well, then you can tell those stories back to them. I always try to say, don't say, don't you remember I just told you that, or actually, it's better not to say, do you remember this? Or do you remember that? Now, these are things we all did, okay? I'm going to stand up here and say some things because I did all this. I made all the mistakes. And so you're not making a mistake, you're learning. This is a journey. So much of this disease is trial and error. I used to keep 2 filing cabinets on my shoulder. This one was, okay, that worked. I'm going to do it again. And this one was, never going to do that again. That was not the reaction I thought I was going to get. So, so much of this disease is trial and error. So what I'm trying to do today is just help you understand the disease so it will help you. So, but anyway, when you talk to them about stories, then say, I remember when we did this, or I remember you telling me this, and it will put smiles on their face, because things that they repeat over and over, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but it's very important to them. So as a disease progresses, their age is regressing. So, okay, so a little bit more. Oh, wait, I'm on the, oh, you know what? I went the wrong way. I'll get this right. So what is their main disability? Their main disability is short-term memory loss. I mean, it's what starts it, and it goes all the way through the disease. And it seems like an easy concept when you hear that, okay, short-term memory loss, okay, I get that. It takes years to fully grasp what I'm saying. And it takes fully grasp to understand that, because they're never going to remember what you said. And as the disease progresses, in their short-term, and their, I talked about their short-term memory, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And if you listen to them, and when they repeat a question to you, you can almost time it. And that's going to tell you how long their short-term memory is, okay? And then you'll have an idea about it. So,
Can you say that again? What you just said, almost time it.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So when you're having a conversation with them and they'll ask you a question, and you answer it, then if they come back and ask you again, then you can kind of glance down at your watch, or if they generally, when they start repeating it, they will repeat a few times, so you can kind of look down, and then next time they ask you the question again, that'll give you an idea that in that moment, that's how long their short-term memory is. Okay. And sometimes, I mean, that's, as the disease progresses, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, where the hills are like this, just like I did when I was standing up here. They live in this moment, and then they live in this moment. I mean, that's the way it is. So, okay, let's see here. So it was really interesting with this, because what happens is, when they're on top of the hill, they are really good. They understand everything. They can articulate things back to you. I remember with Dad, I would talk to him about the foundation, and he would articulate things back to me, and I would be like, that is so good, Dad. Do you have it? It's just hard, because when they're good, they are so good, but then they just, then they forget it, So, but again, it's a gradual sequence during the disease. Okay. So, so Alzheimer's, affects both short-term. They could remember their long-term memory. It's amazing how long they can remember things back from their childhood, and elementary school, and even high school and college. So, but it also affects the long-term memory, which really, in my experience, and I've been doing this 20 plus years, you're well, you're almost in the end stage, before their short-term memory kind of disappears. So it's pretty interesting. But so that doesn't look quite right. Anyway, I think I skipped this page. Did I? Yes, I did. Okay, I'm sorry. I am not doing this very good. Okay, I'm like, wait a minute, we are off here. Okay. Is that going backwards? No. Okay. Okay. Well, I guess it does have long-term. So long-term memory here, there, what happens to them is at that point is they forget faces and they forget names and they forget their grandchildren because they were the last one into the picture. The children that they remember. And here's the thing too about being a child of someone is that even though you kind of reach a point sometimes where they don't remember your name, they never lose their emotional memory, which to me is so interesting. They know, like my mom didn't always know my name, but she knew I was someone that she loved and that she trusted. And so I think it's important that when people get to that point, that really hurts them, but they do remember you. They just can't remember your name, you know? And so, but long-term memories are memories, from the past. And so what I really noticed with my parents, it was like the grandkids. They couldn't remember. My dad would say, now, who does that one go with? And what are their names? And, things like that. And, how you get home from the store, how to take a bath, how to get dressed. That has to do with cognitive abilities as well, which we're going to go into right now. So their second main disability is they lose their cognitive abilities. So what is cognition? Cognition has to do with how people understand and they act in this world. It's their set of abilities, their skills, their processes that have to do with nearly every human action. For example, answering a telephone requires 4 cognitive abilities. The first one is perception. When they hear the phone ring, do they understand that that's the phone ringing? The second one is decision taking. Do I answer the phone or do I not answer the phone? And then the third one is motor skills. Do they have the ability to reach down and pick up the phone or walk across the floor and pick it up? And then the fourth one is language. Can they pick up the phone, understand what someone is saying, and be able to articulate something back to them? So that is the other main disability. And this really kicks in more in that second half of in the middle stage is when they kind of start forgetting how to do things. Okay, so this is the first thing that we noticed with my mother. And when she was 69, she called me and she said, Betsy, I'm just stepping out of everything. I mean, she told everybody this. I'm tired. I don't want to do anything anymore. I mean, she taught Sunday school. She tutored adults for probably 30 years. And, she did she was in a lot of activities. Well, at the time, I was about 36, and 69 seemed old to me back then. Now I realize how young it is, but she backed out of everything. And so, that's the interesting about it is it's the first sign that you will see where she realizes that she has a problem. See, she didn't want anybody else to notice it. So they back out. They're embarrassed. They realize there's something wrong. So they do see. So what's interesting about this disease is there's 2 types of people. They have one that has insight into themselves, just like my mom did right there. She noticed that there was something wrong, so I'm going to withdraw. And then you have people like my dad who had no idea of it at all. I'll tell you a funny story on him is he'd had it for years and he was still working. And his assistant went to get lunch for him. And when she came back, he had a piece of paper. He had been rifling through her desk, okay, like a child, rifling through there. He had a piece of paper, and when she walked in, he goes, I found this letter from the Mayo Clinic, and it says that I have Alzheimer's. And he said, I don't remember forgetting anything. That says it all right there. Okay, I don't remember forgetting anything. I mean, honestly, that's the way they are. Okay, so I mean, it really is the truth. So it's funny. So some of the next signs, that you will see are just their absent-mindedness. Now it's kind of scary as I read through these because I do them all. So they begin to misplace their keys. Where's my purse? Where are my glasses? Where did I set my glasses down? I'm like, ooh, I need to think about this. They'll put their glasses in the usual place. They'll look up a recipe and not be able to follow it. I think one of the big ones too now is because of our phones. You know, they have a difficult time with the phones and the remotes. I mean, to me, that's a pretty early sign is when, how do you do this and how do you do that? And so I think that's, you know, those are good early sign, you know, detectors. So also some, you know, along these same lines is you'll find that they have a hard time finishing tasks sometimes, you know, like folding laundry, making the beds. You know, I think what's interesting too is, you know, she'll forget how to cook a dish that she's cooked her whole life. You know, you'd be like, Mom, I want that recipe. Oh, I'll write it down for you one day. It was never in a recipe box. And one thing we noticed with my mom is she wanted to eat out more often too. And then let's see here. So folding towels, making beds, yeah, cleaning the bathroom. I mean, just anything that they do, they get sidetracked. What happens to them is they have a thought, and so they're like, oh, I need to go do this. And so they walk in the other room to do that, and they totally forget what they were doing back here, and they'll start a whole nother project. That's why people who live alone, it can be very dangerous if they like to cook, because they'll turn that stove on and they'll be cooking, and then the phone will ring and they'll walk out of the room and answer the phone, and then they get sidetracked, and you know, you can have a fire and things like that. So you have to really be careful for people too that live alone. So this was really, my mom had a couple different things that happened to her that, you know, caused some concern. But this is the one that really, you know, I think because when she was actually diagnosed, but she called my dad crying and she couldn't balance the checkbook. And so, so my dad took him, you know, he took her several times, but they just kept telling us, oh, she's had a stroke, and it affected her short-term memory, because that's just what they said back then. And I actually had a friend that would say, you know, that's what they tell people, you know, that get Alzheimer's. And I'm like, what's Alzheimer's? You know, all I knew is it affected the brain somehow. But so when we took over her checkbook, it was so interesting how it was an eye-opening experience, you know, because she, you know, we started, you know, we would get return checks where, you know, she didn't sign them. She'd put the wrong company or the wrong amount. She would, I think of some of the other things she did. She'd forget to mail them. You know, that was a big thing too. But when we looked at her checkbook, we noticed that everything that came in the mail, she couldn't discern if it was a bill or not. And she just wrote a check to it. You know, there were people taking advantage of her a little bit. And, you know, that was hard because you're like, oh, you know, what is this check for? You know, and so, you know, they just don't fully grasp what it is that they're reading. And so that was, you know, that was a big eye-opening experience. So, but it seems to always affect numbers. Now, again, my dad, he was so interesting. He was went to school at Georgia Tech. He was a numbers person. And I mean, you know, my sister raised cattle, and he'd say, what's the price of beef? And she'd tell him, and she just sold something. And in his head, he could do it. You know, and he'd go, oh, well, that's, you know, price per pound. And she'd go, that's right, Dad. You know, it was always amazing. And we'd sit at I mean, even well into the disease, we'd be at a stoplight, and he'd go, 22 cars just went through that intersection. And I'd go, oh, okay. You know, I mean, he was just always counting something. But so numbers seems to be a big deal in the beginning. So so driving, you know, actually this is the one that actually did it. I'm sorry. That's when he took her the first time, and they said she'd had the stroke, and then you know, we started, you know, noticing things like my sister Linda. She lived in Fayetteville, so she kind of went up and started helping my mom, you know, before I moved back, and she would notice her driving, that she would pull up to a stoplight and drive through it like a stop sign, and you know, she would get lost coming out of the grocery store, and you know, she would forget which way that she was going. But one day, she was driving by herself, and she came home, and my brother Tommy had moved down behind him. And because, you know, my dad traveled a lot and he wanted somebody there, so it just kind of worked out. They bought the house down below him, and so my mom got home one day and she called Tisha, and she said, Tisha, can you come help me? I just can't remember how to do this. And when she walked up there, it was the car. She couldn't remember how to turn off the car. And so that's when she was finally diagnosed. And so I'm thinking that was like 97 or 98, something like. Well, no, that was like 2000 actually. So people have the disease for 5 years or longer. They can say up to 10. You know, where you kind of see some normal things, and then you start seeing more of these signs. So, okay. So early signs in communication. A lot of it is they just can't pull down the word. You know, they're telling you something, they're excited, and they can't pull down the word, or they substitute a word. You know, or a lot of times they'll say something like, "Oh, that thingamajiggy," or "What's that thing right there?" And so with my mother, it was really easy because we could finish her sentences. She didn't mind at all. And so, so that worked really well with us. We could always try to figure out what it was she was saying. But if they don't like you, if it offends them, if you try to finish their sentence, then you just got to sit back and be patient and see if they can come up with the word, you know. So I'm just going to talk here for a few minutes on communication. And so one thing about the substituting of words is they have no idea that they're doing it. So if you correct them on that, then it's going to irritate them. It's going to make them mad. It's either going to make them mad or it's going to make them feel bad. You know, those are kind of the two things. And so Bill Bridgewater is a gentleman that got it in his 40s. And because he was so healthy, they did a lot of really aggressive medicine on him. I kind of think he's still alive, but we did a conference together in like 2010. And he was amazing. But he told me, he said, my wife would say, "You're substituting a word." And he'd say, "No, I'm not." But then his granddaughter came up and said something to him, and he believed her. He didn't want to believe his wife. So I thought, okay, that's a good point. I will remember that. But you know, because their disability is short-term memory loss, that you know, you want to try to realize that. Okay, I totally got lost there. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. In Texas, he's in Texas. He's either in Texas or Colorado. He could be in. He was amazing. He spoke all over the country for a long time with the Alzheimer's Association and different groups, because he was all about it, you know. And so, yeah, I think he's. If I saw a picture, then that would help. Okay, so I think some of the basic things are, you know, you just want to be kind, you know, and try not to correct them when they do something wrong. You know, I mean, the point is really, what difference does it make? You know, it's hard, you know, too, because we want things to be the way that they were, you know, and when they change, then it's hard. But you know, the main thing is you don't want to correct them, you know. You know, you don't want to say, "Don't you remember I just told you that?" Because, you know, I remember saying that to my mom a few times, and then I saw the look on her face, and I was like, "Oh, I'm never going to say that again," you know, because it hurt her, you know. Because here's the thing: they don't realize that they've done it, you know, because you still have to go back to that. You know, their main disability is short-term memory loss. So, okay. So here are some communication tips. You know, you want to. This is what I've learned in my experience. You want to speak calmly and end your sentences with something positive. I probably said 10,000 times, maybe 50,000 times, "Isn't that great? We're going to have so much fun." Because even if they don't quite understand what you're saying, then they'll go with you. You know, my mom, one day after I'd moved in with her, and you know, we're at her house, but she looked at me one night and she said, does my mom, does she know I'm here? You know, and I realized that, you know, she's frightened. She's, you know, a little bit frightened. And so this is, you know, I call it creative communication. And it's where you kind of say whatever it is you have to say to keep them calm in that moment, you know. And so this was right in the beginning of it. We were kind of learning. And so I said, well, BB, we called her BB. I go, well, BB, your mom just called. And she said that she has to work tonight. And so you're going to spend the night with me. Isn't that great? We're going to have so much fun. And, we'll watch a movie and eat some popcorn. And she was just standing back there looking at me like, I am not sure I believe you. But because it was positive, she went with it, And so, there's times when you have to be creative. I mean, I have a whole talk on redirection and creative communication. But, it's some of my caregivers are like, I'm never going to lie to her, or I'm never going to do that. It's not really that you're lying. You're just trying to keep them calm in that moment, because again, this moment affects that moment, which affects that moment, and it just seems to work, and then they forget it, but they're happy. And so when you're communicating with them, you want to keep everything short and simple. They're really kind of on a need to know basis, as well. But, like if I said to my mom, hey, let's go to the bedroom and let's put on our pajamas, and then we'll brush our teeth, and then we'll sit down and watch a TV show. Well, that's way too many instructions. She's not going to remember all that. Now early on, it's not a problem. But as the disease progresses, it's not. So you just want to keep things short and simple. And then, again, they're on a need-to-know basis. You especially don't want to mention something in the future. Oh, hey, Mom, tomorrow we're going to go see your brother Dan. And then what you'll find is in 2 hours, they're dressed and ready to go. Or they wake up at 2 in the morning and they're ready to go. So it's just best to keep those things to yourself until an hour or two before whatever it is you're getting ready to do. Now, early on, again, you can say things to them, but once they start doing those kind of things, like, now when are we going? Are we going today? They'll ask you 100 times. Then that's your signal that, okay, from this point forward, I just need to wait till right before we need to get dressed to go to tell them what we're doing. And then, you always want to be patient. It can be hard, but being a caregiver can be tiring. I mean, I never went on. I did everything wrong. I never went on vacation. I rarely left the house, and if I did, I was wondering, what are they doing? What is she saying? Because I didn't think, other than my sister, anybody could take good care of her as we did, because we were with her all the time. She was a wanderer. I slept with her at night, and I just made all the mistakes. And so it really is important that you take care of yourself, you eat right, you exercise, all those things that Dr. Herbst is going to talk about. I'm really excited about her at the 1245 speech. She's actually our doctor, but it's going to be really good. But, it's important that you take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of anybody else? So really important, because, boy, I made every mistake. So, some more communication tips are, you want to give them a lot of time to answer. And, again, everybody's individual, and you just have to see how it works with your loved one. Again, do they allow you to help them or not? And you can just sit back, and you don't want to rush them. And if they lose a thought, you can come back and ask them, very nicely, try to help them come up with that thought. But I think, let's see, I was going to say something, but here it is again. Don't you remember? I just told you that. Definitely want to take that out. I had a really good point I was going to make here. Okay, this is really important. This isn't in my notes, but we have to learn to live in their world, because they are not capable of living in ours. So I'm going to give you an example. Well, I'm a grandmother, as y'all could see there. I'm a grandmother, and so, but my first grandchild, lives in California, and so I went to California, and I went in their apartment, and I set my luggage down, and her name was Violet. I went in Violet's room, and I sat down on the floor with her, and she wanted to read books. So we read all these books, and And she threw them aside, and then she wanted to play dress up. So we got up and we put on funny hats and scarves and jewelry, and we danced around. And, well, then she got bored with that. So then she wanted to show me her stuffed animals. So we went over to her bed, and she was telling me all about her stuffed animals, that a 2.5-year-old could do. And then her mother walked in, and she said, "It's time for Violet to take a nap." And I was like, oh. So I picked her up and gave her a hug and a kiss and gave her to her mom. And then I walked out of the room. And so what did I just do? When I stepped in that room with Violet, I did whatever she wanted to do, however she wanted to do it. It didn't matter. Now, if she walked over to an electrical outlet, I'd have said, no, 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 we can't touch that. But otherwise, I lived in her world. And so then when I stepped up and stepped back out into the hallway, then you step back into our world, which is chaotic. It's, what am I fixing for dinner? Gosh, there's so much laundry to do. The yard needs to be mowed. Have I paid my bills? Then you're back in our world. So what you have to learn to do, this is probably one of the most important points I can tell you, is when you step in that room with your loved one, you're stepping into their world. Because as the disease progresses, it becomes harder and harder for them to live in ours. And so their world is not bad, at all. And so, you just have to put everything aside. I mean, I would stand outside my mother's door and I'd be like this, okay, I'm going to get it together and I'm going to go in there and we're going to have a great day, and so I'm going to let everything go. You just have to let things go. And so, but to me, living in their world is one of the most important things. And then the other thing I told earlier is about the emotional memory. Emotional memory is so important in how you communicate with them as well, because if you argue with them, if you fight with them, if you correct them all the time, you don't ever want them to develop a negative emotional memory towards you, because that changes everything. And they'll never do anything that you ask them to do from that point forward. It's amazing. So, I really harp on this when I'm talking with healthcare professionals, because, if you're in a nursing home or a memory care or any of them, and you're not talking correctly to them and they get upset, then, they cause a behavioral charge, a behavioral reaction, and then they get in trouble. And, when really it's their fault because they didn't know how to communicate, it's hard. So, two really important points. I don't have them in here because I was doing a different one. So, but the key here is their whole world depends on you, the caregiver. You're their live stream. They depend everything on you. And so when you approach them, when you walk in that room with them, you got to put a smile on your face, and you got to, be up and be happy, because they're looking at you, and when they repeat that question for the 10th time, you roll your eyes because you're like, oh, they're never going to get off of this. Then they see that and they feel it, and so if you get upset, they get upset. They don't really know why they're upset, but they're upset. Okay. So really, how you communicate is so important to them. And again, I've made all these mistakes, so I can see some looks, where you're like, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. Everybody does it. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Okay. So that's how you learn. That's how you learn. Again, you have these filing cabinets. I'm going to do this. It worked. I'm going to do it again. Not ever going to do that again, and it's hard. It's hard to break a habit, and so, but you'll get there, and everything will be good, but don't panic. Okay. But one of the other things that is important is learn the eyes, because the eyes are your insight into their brain as the disease progresses. Are they smiling when you walk in that room, or are they sad? My mother cried every day. She had a lot of insight into herself, and she would say, "What's wrong with me?" And I'd say, "Well, BB, you had a stroke. It affected your short-term memory. We never changed from that." And we said, "That's why we're here. We get to be together. Isn't that great?" I said, "But you're healthy and you're beautiful." And then one day I said to her, "And you know what, BB, you're taking this medicine and you're getting better every day." And she went, oh, thank you. And she quit crying. And I went, oh my gosh, I just lied to my mom, but it gave her hope. I told her to the day she died, she was getting better every day because it gave her hope. There's nothing wrong with giving them hope. So, but the eyes are important because they have a lot of different looks. Are they happy or are they sad? When they're sick, they have a look, or if they're hurting real bad, they have a look. So there's just a lot of different looks. So if you learn those expressions, that will always help you to understand where they are when you walk in that room with them. So, okay, I've gone through a lot of this. Don't argue, don't fill in a missing word unless it's okay. Pay close attention to your body language. Don't question them. All those things that we just talked about. So this is a biggie. Take you out of your vocabulary and add we into it. When I did that with my mom, it changed everything. Because nobody wants to be told what to do. I mean, our dogs don't want to be told what to do, if you think about it. So, I got to where I'd say, why don't we go in the bathroom? Let's brush our teeth. I would go in there with her and I would put toothpaste on my toothbrush and put toothpaste on her toothbrush. And then, we'd start brushing our teeth. But if she was in the valley and not sure what to do with the toothbrush, she would look at me, because they will mimic you for a long time, eating wise and things like that. Because if I had just, put the toothbrush on her toothbrush and handed it to her, she might have done her eyebrows, or brushed her hair, you just don't know what she's thinking in that moment. So if you take you out of your vocabulary and add we into it, makes a really big difference in your relationship with them. Okay, so home safety, real quick. Let me see how much time I got. I am gonna run through this because these are things that you don't even think about. So I'll go in order here. I'll get sidetracked. Clutter can be difficult, so clearing off their end tables and things like that. Now, here's the big thing. You sure don't want to do it if they're saying don't do it. Okay, I don't want to do this, So some of these things you can kind of do when they're not there, or you can say let's redecorate, or something along those lines. Because if they don't want you to do it, you have to stop. You can't do it. But a lot of things is harder for them to deal with. Don't ever move their favorite chair and table and things like that. You can put a bowl on the table and say, this is where we're going to put our keys, our glasses, things like that. I think area rugs are one of the big things. You can take them up, once if they start to seem to be having a little issue with walking, then you definitely want to take up the area rugs. But in the bathroom, one of the things you can do is you can get that two-sided tape and tape the rugs down, in the bathroom, and that way they don't slip on those. You want to increase the light in each of the rooms. Okay, there's the rugs. Again, you want to make their world, really simple. They say that colors, sometimes too much on a napkin or things can be confusing to them. So solids seems to be a better thing. One of the things that we did, my mom was a wanderer. And so we got a hotel lock and put it up high on the door. So even if she got up, I would do this on her bedroom door, because I slept with her for years. And she would wander, but she was a scaredy cat. So we always locked her door at night. She's locked her door always, her whole life. But then I would come up here and I would click that just in case, because there was, a lot of nights we were up all night. It'd be 4:30 in the morning. I'd be like, Mimi, I've got to get up in 2 hours and get my kids off to school, because, I was a sandwich generation. My youngest kids were 12. Molly was 13, when we moved back home. And so, but a lot of times, we'd be up with her. But if she seemed fairly stable, I'd just lay in the bed and watch her. But if she went over to the door and tried to open it, then I would get up. But it's interesting. They don't look up and they don't look down. They zero in on the doorknob. So if you're ever traveling, one of the things you can do is put a seat, like if you're in a hotel, you could put a chair in front of the door and put a suitcase in it and raise the back, and they can't see the doorknob. And so it will keep them from wanting to get out. And so I have a whole story on that, but we're out of time. So, through the Alzheimer's Association, you can get the ID bracelet. They have so many things now today that that you can do, from your watch, to your phone. There's so many different things that you can do. But I'm a big proponent of cameras, especially if they live alone, because then at least if they walk out, you know which direction they went. But one of the things that we did too with my mom is, because she got out of bed multiple times, and just in case I fell asleep, put a dog mat on the, you can buy one at your, dog supplies, and when they step on it, it makes a noise. It's made for putting on a couch, so if a dog jumps on a couch, it will make a noise and they'll jump off. And so that's what we used back then. Of course, now they have bed lasers and, all kind of, a lot of great products out there. And so let's see. My mom, one day we were cleaning and she picked up the bleach and started to drink it. And I was like, so, you do want to kind of childproof your house a little bit, put all the cleaning supplies away. And that was fairly early too. But, she lost her ability to read. And so that made it very difficult, which was really sad because she was an avid reader, but she lost the ability to read, where my dad could read all the way up to the time he had a stroke, and then he died a couple months later, but he could read. She lost her ability to read very early, so it just, depends on how it affects the brain. Eating issues, there's really not any eating issues early on. I think the main thing you want to try to do is you want to go through their cabinets and their spices, and because you'll be amazed at the outdated food that's in their refrigerator and in their cabinets. But really, there's no eating issues other than can they remember they've eaten or can they not? My mother ate all day long. I mean, she went from a size probably 4 to, I mean, we eventually had to get her, to like a 12 probably, or even more than that. We had to go to elastic pants because I wasn't going to tell her she couldn't have it. No way. And I like sweets too. We all, I'll just put it this way, we all gained weight, and we had a good time doing it. But she was so funny one day. You know how they substitute words? We were in the closet, and she said, we were putting something on. It was too tight, and she's like, "I'm getting so tall." And I'm like, "We're all getting tall, BB." So it's just funny, how they do things. But okay, let's see what we got. So getting started real quick, I'm gonna talk about this, and then we'll go to some question and answering. So my sister Linda, as I said, she lived here, and so when my mom was finally diagnosed, she stepped in, and actually she probably started when maybe after she balanced the checkbook, but they don't really want anybody in their house, and they sure don't need a babysitter, and they don't want anybody watching them. So you have to be creative in how you do it. And so Linda, she was so smart. She would do, she'd call like, "Mom, my washing machine is broke. Can I bring some laundry up and do some laundry?" And so Mom would go, "Sure," because moms want to help you any way that they can, and so she'd go, "Sure." So she would go up and do laundry, and then she might say, "Well, let's go to lunch, or let's go shopping." My mom loved to shop. And so she would be creative in ways to stay, and then, just took that washing machine forever to get fixed. And so, but, getting started, can sometimes be hard, but you have to, all through this disease, when you're communicating with them, especially if it's a loved one, you have to ask yourself, okay, you know this person. And so, their likes, their dislikes, their background. So you have to ask yourself, what can I say to get them to do what I need them to do? That's how you learn to communicate in a lot of ways. What can I say to get them to do what I need to? It's like Harper right now, just turned 3. What can I say to get her to not go over every seat when she came in, but that's, because their likes, you know their dislikes, you know how they grew up. And so you use those things when you communicate with them to get them to do what it is that you need them to do. If it's, showering, whatever it is that you need them to do. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, okay, I'm coming back here. Okay. I had a whole thing on survival tips. Take care of, just let me tell you this. Take care of yourself, please. You know, you have to think about you sometimes. You know, like I said, I didn't, and you know, it was a mistake. And so there's a lot of things you can do. You know, you can get cans of soup or milk jugs and do some, you know, arm raises, and you know, you can do squats behind a chair, keep that blood going. You can do lunges down the hallway, you know, make it fun. And but you know, you've really got to take care of yourself. But somebody sent this to my, I think, to my dad. We don't know who it was, but when it would get hard, and I would think sometimes, I don't know if I can do this. You know, I would go in there, and we had it taped to my mother's bathroom because she couldn't read, so she couldn't read it. But so I would read this, and then it would. I'm not going to read it because it's going to make me cry. But I mean, I usually do read it, but if you read it, I really believe that this is what she would say to me if she could.